Hello and welcome to The British Book Guy. So what I wanted to do with this episode was talk less about books and more about my own book and what I learned from having written my own book, and more specifically what I learned from sending my book out to potential agencies to try and get it published and getting back more than a dozen rejections. So that's what I really wanted to talk about today, those rejections. So I'll tell you a bit about Loki. Loki is the first novel I've ever written. I started it when I was 19 and it took me 3 years to write, and I spent a year editing it. About 6 months into the editing process, I sent out about a dozen submissions. I sent out more after that. I spent another 6 months editing it and sent out more submissions, but I just want to focus on those initial 12 because those were the first major rejections that I got back, or some that I didn't even get back. So getting back rejections is not necessarily a bad thing because you learn a lot, and I certainly did. So I sent out these dozen submissions and then I panicked and realised the book wasn't good enough, and that's why I spent another 6 months editing it after I'd sent them out. And I waited a good while to get them back, you know, the standard 6 weeks, 2 months, that sort of thing. And the first one that came back, I was really excited to get it. I was super happy to get a rejection. That's not what you'd think, but getting back my first rejection made me really happy. It was proof I was trying, that I was putting myself out there. I was really trying to get this thing published. I was serious about it. So I got this email. I was like, yes, rejection, I'm a real writer now. Nobody can say that I haven't tried. I've got proof that I have tried. The first one, not a problem at all. Really happy about that. It's not as if I was expecting to get accepted on my first one. So I wasn't upset about that in the least. The second one came through, and again I was quite happy to get that. More proof that I was a real writer. Double the proof that I was putting myself out there and I was really trying to get it published, as I was still working on it. And then by the third one, that happiness starts to wane. And that's when you start realising that something's wrong. And maybe it shouldn't take 3, maybe it should take more than 3, so having sent out a dozen. But that's when you start to hit home that this isn't working out. And by the 4th, it was really starting to hit me. And I got the replies quite spaced out. I didn't get them in like a week or 2 weeks. I got them across a month or 2, depending on how quickly they could get back to me, which is standard. I was expecting that. But it came. And about the time I was over one rejection, another one would come through, and that started to get to me. And it happened every single time. I was like, okay, one rejection, put it in my drawer, get over it. Bam, there's another rejection. Great. And then by about the 5th, you start to think, I've only sent out 12. This is nearly half of them are rejections. I'm seeing a pattern of rejections now, and that's really not comforting. And that's how my thought process started to go. I'm getting more rejections, so the likelihood of getting back an acceptance is really dwindling. And that really hits you. You think it's bad that you start getting rejections. When you realise that those rejections start to mean you're not getting as many acceptances, that's when it starts to hit you. Because before you're only thinking, okay, that's a no, move on to what could potentially be a yes. But when you start getting a pattern of them, a string of rejections, yeah, that's when it starts to hit home. When you start getting back about half the ones that you sent out, and those are all rejections, that's when it starts to become less about the novel, which is obviously flawed, and more about you as a writer. And when that realisation hits in, that's when the self-doubt comes in, because it's suddenly not that the novel you've written is bad enough, but that your skills as a writer aren't bad enough. And this is something you really have to come to terms with. It took me a long while to come to terms with it, so much that after this year of editing it, I leant back and I looked at this book that I'd gone through more than 2 dozen times, just editing it in the space of a year, and I said, this is really not a good book. And in some ways it's not, but then equally, anything is good if you're working it hard enough. You just need to find the right people to help you through it. So, you know, there was this whole thing, like you get 1 rejection back, so they don't like the book, and 2 people don't like the book, and then 6 people don't like the book, and then maybe they don't like the book, maybe they just hate you as a writer. Well, not you as a writer, but your skills. It's obviously not that personal. Don't ever take it that personal if you get a rejection. So then you can use that self-doubt and you can say, right, I'm going to quit, or I'm going to take what I've learned from all these rejections. Obviously this book isn't good enough, so I'm going to make the next one better. And that's what you have to say to yourself. There's nothing else you could do about it. You're either going to quit at this point or you're going to carry on going. Yeah, I think that's about all I can say about this. You can learn a lot from it. You can learn kind of what's going wrong. And you learn a lot just by finishing a novel anyway, and then sending it out. But by sending it out, it's a hard lesson, and it's a hard lesson that you learn once. And I learned it for once, and if I ever send out a manuscript again, which I will, but you never know what to expect your first round of submissions. So there's nothing you can do but bite the bullet and suffer through it. That's the best advice I can give. Expect to suffer and embrace the suffering. I hope you liked this slightly more morbid episode of British Book Guy. That's not a very good way to end the episode, but if a takeaway from this isn't just carry on doing what you're doing fine, you can't please everyone, that's great. That's what the takeaway should be. If your takeaway from this is quit writing because you're rubbish, you read me all wrong, I'm afraid. Leave a comment downstairs if you've ever had a rejection and what you felt about your rejections. I'd be really interested to see what everybody else thinks about what I went through. Obviously we all go through these things differently. And I hope you liked this episode of British Book Guy.